Some cities are not obliterated in a single night, but rather wither and fade across generations. Their destruction comes not from one decisive blow, but from the insidious erosion of hubris, fanaticism, endless power struggles, and humanity's chilling indifference to knowledge itself. Alexandria stands as just such a tragedy. Once the ancient world's most luminous beacon, the custodian of humanity's greatest treasury of knowledge, and home to the renowned lighthouse that guided every vessel on the Mediterranean, Alexandria ultimately became its most poignant warning. A civilization, no matter how glorious, can crumble if its people turn their backs on understanding, on tolerance, and on the foundational values that forge their very identity. What makes this narrative resonate with us so profoundly today is not merely how great Alexandria once was, but how terrifyingly its downfall mirrors the self-inflicted wounds of so many contemporary societies. And perhaps, the more we contemplate its story, the more we are forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. The most dreadful fate is not when a city is razed, but when an entire era loses the collective consciousness to safeguard its most precious endowments. In 34 BC, within the magnificent confines of Egyptian Alexandria, Mark Antony and Queen Cleopatra, resplendent on gilded thrones and adorned in attire fit for deities, audaciously carved up almost the entirety of the Eastern Mediterranean among their children. This was far more than a mere spectacle of power. It was the moment the ancient world glimpsed a seemingly impossible possibility. Alexandria came perilously close to supplanting Rome as the epicenter of global power and civilization. Imagine a city boasting a population of 600,000 souls, a colossal lighthouse visible for tens of miles out at sea, a library daring to embrace the ambition of housing all human knowledge, and brilliant minds who, nearly 2 millennia before the Industrial Revolution, invented a rudimentary steam engine. Alexandria was not simply immensely wealthy. Alexandria was humanity's boldest dream, meticulously constructed from stone, papyrus, and the apex of its collective intellect. It all began on an April day in 331 BC. After sweeping through the mighty Persian Empire, Alexander the Great paused on a strategically vital strip of land nestled between the vast Mediterranean Sea and the tranquil Lake Mareotis. Here, he commanded the establishment of a new city. He entrusted Dinocrates of Rhodes, his architect, with the task of designing an urban plan based on Hippodamus's perfect grid model. The city's main artery, the Canopic Way, stretched approximately 5 kilometers from east to west, wide enough for 8 chariots to travel abreast without hindrance. From its very inception, Alexandria was never conceived as an ordinary metropolis. It was envisioned as an enduring symbol, destined to outlast even the magnificent empire its founder had created. Great Alexander himself never witnessed the completed masterpiece. Just weeks after laying the first foundations, he pressed on with his eastward conquests. In 323 BC, he died in Babylon at the tender age of 32. Yet, the young emperor's death did not extinguish the dream of Alexandria. On the contrary, it imbued the city with an unprecedented sacredness and importance. Ptolemy, Alexander's trusted general now governing Egypt, intercepted Alexander's funeral cortege and brought his body back to be entombed in the heart of the new city. This was no mere act of grief. It was politics at its most sophisticated and astute. In the ancient world, whoever possessed Alexander's body laid claim to legitimacy, inheriting the prestige and power of his vast empire. From that moment, Alexandria indisputably became the most potent pilgrimage site, drawing all eyes and ambitions from across the known world. Ptolemy I embarked on the true work of construction. He commissioned the Heptastadion, a colossal mole approximately 1.2 kilometers long, which connected the mainland to the island of Pharos, thereby creating 2 immense harbors on either side. This monumental engineering feat transformed Alexandria into the foremost maritime hub, the veritable heart of Mediterranean commerce. But Ptolemy's ambitions extended beyond mere trade. He desired the city to become humanity's intellectual capital, a convergence point for the pinnacle of knowledge. To this end, he proposed the Mausoleum, a temple dedicated to the Muses, but simultaneously a cutting-edge research institution accompanied by a library with the ambitious mission of collecting the entirety of human knowledge. Here, the seeds of a wonder, of an academic center unparalleled in history, were sown. By the reign of Ptolemy II, Alexandria had soared to become the ancient world's second-largest city, surpassed only by Rome, with an estimated population ranging from 500 to 600,000 people. Yet, its true distinction lay not merely in its scale. It was a deliberately engineered multi-ethnic social structure, reflecting a global vision that was also riddled with contradictions. The city was divided into three major districts. The royal quarter, Brucheion, in the northeast, was home to the Greeks, featuring a magnificent palace, a theatre, a gymnasium, and two intellectual icons, the Mausoleum and its library. Only Greeks were afforded full citizenship and the right to participate in governance. Despite ruling Egypt for 3 centuries, the Ptolemaic dynasty resolutely spoke Greek, worshipped Greek gods, and maintained a staunch Greek identity, thereby ensuring that non-Greeks were systematically excluded from positions of power. Next lay the Jewish quarter, home to one of the largest Jewish communities in the ancient world, possibly numbering up to 100,000. They enjoyed a high degree of autonomy, possessing their own leaders and council. It was from this very community that the Septuagint emerged, the foundational Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, which opened a crucial gateway for Jewish thought to integrate into the wider Hellenistic world. To the southwest was Rhakotis, the district designated for the indigenous Egyptians, the people who had inhabited this land for millennia before the Greeks arrived. They held no citizenship, no political voice, and primarily performed manual labor, serving in the harbors and Greek households. This was the profound irony of Alexandria, a city that embodied global ambition and an enlightened spirit, yet operated on a social stratification system that was remarkably rigid and unyielding. Then, on the island of Pharos, an architectural marvel soared, astonishing the entire world. The lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, was commenced under Ptolemy I and completed around 247 BC during the reign of Ptolemy II. Sostratus of Cnidus, the ingenious architect, skillfully designed it in 3 tiers, a colossal square base, a graceful octagonal middle section, and a cylindrical top housing the beacon flame. Its estimated height, ranging from 100 to 150 meters, made it one of the tallest structures on Earth, at the time a truly extraordinary architectural imprint. By night, a blazing fire on its summit guided ships through darkness and tempestuous seas. By day, a gigantic concave bronze mirror reflected the sun's rays, creating a distant navigational signal. While some details may have been exaggerated over time, its symbolic value was not amplified in the slightest. Alexandria then did not just light the way for ships. It illuminated the path for a brilliant civilization shaping the future. Not far from the harbor stood the Mausoleum and the library, the 2 intellectual hearts of Alexandria. This was not merely a repository of books. It was the ancient world's first model of a research university, an idea thousands of years ahead of its time. Scholars were generously salaried from the royal treasury, provided with free accommodation, exempt from taxes, and, most importantly, granted the freedom to pursue research without the compulsion to teach or produce immediate practical results. It was an astonishingly ideal environment for the liberation of intellect. The Library of Alexandria, meanwhile, pursued an almost obsessive goal: to collect the entirety of human knowledge, not merely confined to Greek texts, but encompassing all writings from every conceivable source, irrespective of origin or language. The Ptolemaic dynasty's acquisition policy was implemented with ruthless and uncompromising resolve. Every ship docking in Alexandria's port was subjected to stringent inspection. If any scrolls or books were found on board, they were confiscated for copying. The copy was returned to the owner, while the precious original was retained for the library. Knowledge was amassed not solely through pure scholarship or generous patronage, but at times through outright appropriation. The library's scale is estimated to have ranged from 40,000 to 700,000 scrolls, a colossal number for that era. Whatever the true figure, the sheer audacity of a civilization daring to conceive of gathering all human understanding into a single location was extraordinary, an ambition almost beyond belief. At this intellectual epicenter emerged individuals who fundamentally altered the course of human thought. Euclid penned his Elements, laying the cornerstone for Western geometry for over 2 millennia. Eratosthenes accurately calculated the Earth's circumference with astonishing precision, demonstrating the power of scientific reasoning. Other scholars delved into the complex nervous system, developed systematic library classification, and laid firm foundations for mechanics and physics. And then, in the 1st century AD, came Hero of Alexandria, a mechanical genius. While Rome conquered the world with swords and military might, Hero conquered with machines and intellect. He engineered the eolipile, the first recorded steam-powered device in history. Though merely a demonstration model, it proved that steam could generate mechanical motion, a truly revolutionary concept. He also designed automatic temple doors, the world's first vending machine, programmable self-propelled devices, and wind-powered instruments. It is no exaggeration to say that Alexandria once bore the unmistakable resemblance of the ancient world's most brilliant Silicon Valley. However, even the most magnificent cities harbor inherent fault lines, hidden cracks beneath their grandeur. In 48 BC, Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria, becoming embroiled in the fierce civil war between Ptolemy XIII and the shrewd Queen Cleopatra. Besieged in the royal quarter with meager forces, Caesar ordered the burning of the Egyptian fleet in the harbor to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. The ravenous flames swiftly spread to the docks, grain warehouses, and, tragically, to precious papyrus scroll repositories. For many centuries thereafter, it was widely believed that the main library of Alexandria had been completely consumed in this conflagration. However, subsequent archaeological and historical evidence indicates that both the library and the mausoleum continued to function for several more centuries. It is probable that what burned were either unclassified scroll warehouses or subsidiary libraries. The damage was undoubtedly immense, but it was not the absolute end. Nevertheless, the spiritual impact was profoundly clear. From this point forward, knowledge was shown to be a disposable casualty in ruthless political power struggles, an ominous harbinger for the future. The complex relationship between Caesar and Cleopatra bore Caesarion. Following Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, Mark Antony quickly rose to become one of the most powerful figures in the East, forging a close alliance with Cleopatra. In 34 BC, after a successful Armenian campaign, Antony celebrated a triumph, an honor typically reserved for Rome, not in Rome, but in Alexandria. Before the assembled populace, Antony and Cleopatra, arrayed in majestic divine attire, publicly distributed vast swathes of the eastern Mediterranean to their children. Caesarion was proclaimed King of Kings. The message conveyed was unmistakable. Alexandria, not Rome, was the new center of the world order. Yet, this very arrogance and defiance sealed their fate. In Rome, Octavian skillfully exploited this event as potent propaganda, accusing Antony of betraying Rome by ceding lands to a foreign queen. In 31 BC, Antony and Cleopatra suffered a devastating defeat at the fateful Battle of Actium. The following year, both successively committed suicide, bringing an era to a close. Alexandria fell to Octavian, who would later become Augustus, Rome's first emperor, and came under the direct rule of the Roman Empire. Under Roman rule, Alexandria retained immense importance. The city was a vital link in the Annona, the system that supplied wheat to feed Rome. A huge proportion of the food required for the imperial capital's enormous population passed through Alexandria's bustling ports. In essence, Rome governed the world through its legions, but sustained itself on Egypt's resources, with Alexandria as the primary transit point. Beneath this veneer of prosperity, however, ethnic and religious tensions simmered and intensified. Greeks, Jews, and native Egyptians lived side by side, yet did not truly live together. Violence erupted repeatedly, plunging the city into chronic conflicts. As Christianity spread, a new, deeper fracture emerged. Pagans fiercely opposed Christians, and then Christians themselves became divided, confronting one another. By the 3rd century AD, the Great Library's luster had begun to dim. Royal patronage dwindled, and numerous other cities emerged as competing new intellectual centers. The Maozian persisted, but no longer held its unrivaled position as the undisputed intellectual heart. Then, on 21st July, 365 AD, a catastrophic earthquake off the coast of Crete triggered a terrifying tsunami. The sea receded from Alexandria's shores, revealing a jagged seabed. Curious residents rushed to the waterfront to observe. Subsequently, a colossal wall of water unexpectedly crashed into the city. Ships were flung far inland, and thousands perished in mere minutes. The royal quarter was severely devastated, and over subsequent centuries, an entire section of the city's northeastern shore gradually subsided beneath the waves. Cleopatra's magnificent palace eventually vanished completely into the cold embrace of the Mediterranean Sea. Yet, natural disaster was not the ultimate death knell. What truly killed Alexandria's soul came from humanity itself. In 391 AD, Emperor Theodosius issued decrees ordering the closure or destruction of pagan temples throughout the empire. In Alexandria, the powerful Archbishop Theophilus incited a fanatical Christian mob to destroy the Serapeum, a grand temple dedicated to Serapis, a hybrid Greek-Egyptian deity. This site also housed a subsidiary library, often considered a branch of the Great Library. This library was burned. Statues of the god were smashed. The temple was systematically dismantled stone by stone, reduced to rubble. If one were to pinpoint the exact moment the spirit of the Library of Alexandria truly died, it was then, not in the distant fire of Caesar's time. It was the moment religious fanaticism triumphed over knowledge and tolerance. Then, in 415 AD, violence and ignorance plumbed the moral depths of society. Hypatia, a brilliant female mathematician and astronomer, and one of the city's most prominent intellectuals, was dragged from her chariot by a mob of Christian extremists, stripped naked, brutally murdered, and her body burned. Hypatia's death was not merely a savage killing. It was a chilling declaration that a city which once welcomed all scholars, once a cradle of knowledge, had now begun to punish those who dared to think differently. In my view, it is neither crumbling walls nor burning books that are the most terrifying signs of a civilization in decline. The most dreadful indicator is when people can no longer tolerate the existence of knowledge that falls outside their ingrained beliefs, when understanding is suffocated by prejudice and fanaticism. In 641 AD, Arab forces conquered Alexandria, marking the end of Roman and Byzantine rule. Egypt's political center was shifted to Fustat, a city that later evolved into Cairo. Alexandria lost its status as capital, vital trade routes changed, and the city's population rapidly declined. The city that was once a wonder of the world gradually contracted, transforming into a modest fishing village and receding into obscurity over many centuries. A place that had once gathered humanity's greatest ambitions was ultimately worn away by the relentless march of time, by natural disasters, by political upheavals, by religious schisms, and by the internal divisions within humanity itself. It wasn't until 1994 that underwater archaeologists discovered massive blocks of granite and marble, intact statues, sphinxes, columns, remnants of the royal quarter, and fragments of the famed Pharos lighthouse at the bottom of Alexandria's harbor. This revealed that Alexandria had never entirely vanished from the currents of history. It had merely submerged, broken into thousands of pieces, patiently awaiting future generations to stoop down, gather them up, and reconstruct a glorious past. The story of Alexandria overwhelms with its supreme magnificence. Yet what resonates most powerfully is not its glory or its marvels. It is a profound and costly lesson. This city demonstrated that humans can accumulate almost all the knowledge they possess, can construct monumental edifices that touch the sky, and can create an environment where science, culture, and commerce brilliantly explode. But Alexandria also proved a more painful truth. Knowledge is incredibly fragile, tolerance is incredibly fragile, and a civilization, too, is profoundly fragile. Such a city does not die from a single sword stroke. It perishes from hundreds of small, silent, and persistent cuts, delivered over many centuries. And perhaps that is the indispensable reminder for future generations. A society does not collapse the moment it ceases to build new libraries. Rather, its decline begins when libraries are no longer perceived as important, when the intrinsic value of knowledge is no longer cherished. It does not end immediately when disagreements arise. It truly concludes when discord escalates into blind hatred, and that hatred is proudly embraced as a righteous cause. Alexandria once stood as the most brilliant testament to the boundless power of knowledge and open inquiry. Yet, it tragically became the most searing proof of the devastating price paid when humanity prioritizes its own perceived rightness over the preservation of collective wisdom and objective truth. Looking more broadly, what renders Alexandria immortal is not found in its impregnable city walls, its magnificent palaces, or its colossal harbors. What keeps it alive in our collective consciousness is the profound question it bequeathed to all. Is a civilization's greatness measured by the towering height of its constructions, the might of its military, or its material opulence? Or is it measured, instead, by how it treats knowledge, embraces diversity, and upholds truth itself? This inquiry, above all else, has occupied my thoughts most deeply when reflecting on Alexandria's entire trajectory. For ultimately, while every empire aspires to unparalleled greatness, not all possess the foresight or wisdom to grasp that sustained existence is not solely a product of absolute power, but rather of the capacity for self-restraint, the ability to temper that very power. Alexandria once possessed nearly everything a dream city could desire: an unparalleled strategic location, unparalleled commercial prosperity, an unrivaled repository of knowledge, timeless monumental structures, exceptional minds, and influence that transcended all borders. Yet, in the end, none of these could rescue it from the insidious rot from within, from the deep fissures that fractured the very soul of its society. This offers a profoundly modern and unsettling lesson. A society can indeed achieve astonishing rapid growth and reach heights of accomplishment that command global admiration. Yet, if beneath this gleaming facade lie deep divisions, rampant extremism, mutual contempt, a casual disregard for truth, and a willingness to sacrifice knowledge at any altar, then its downfall is not merely a possibility, but an inevitable consequence, a matter of time. I believe this, too, is the most profound value the story of Alexandria offers us today. It doesn't merely enrich our understanding of a fascinating and dramatic historical epoch. It compels us, rather, to hold a mirror up to our own present circumstances. We inhabit an era where knowledge can be stored and accessed more abundantly than ever before, readily available at everyone's fingertips. Yet, paradoxically, it is also a time when humanity appears more susceptible to division, swayed by blind belief, entrenched prejudice, and impulsive, fleeting emotions. We can retrieve almost any piece of information in a matter of seconds, but this instant access does not automatically confer wisdom or deeper understanding. Alexandria once housed the world's greatest library, yet ultimately it could not save itself when its people lost the capacity to safeguard the very core values that had brought that library into being. For this reason, I contend that the lesson of Alexandria is far from archaic. It remains disturbingly relevant, an urgent and pressing warning for our age. For succeeding generations, perhaps the most crucial task is not merely to admire the monumental structures of the past, but rather to comprehend why such creations, however robustly built, could not ultimately defend themselves against the relentless currents of history. The lighthouse of Pharos may have defied the tempestuous seas for centuries, but it could not withstand the erosion of time and the corrosive indifference of humankind. The Library of Alexandria may have accumulated the sum of human knowledge, but it could not stand firm against the onslaught of fanaticism and the corrosive tide of intolerance. A city can be constructed from stone and brick, but a civilization can only be sustained by the collective consciousness, the intellect, and the concerted unity of its people. Should future generations overlook this fundamental truth, they risk not merely losing their history, but tragically and unwittingly repeating its most regrettable chapters. Thus, when I gaze upon Alexandria, I perceive not merely a lost city, but a profound mirror reflecting our own human condition. Within it lies the pinnacle of glory that humanity can achieve when knowledge is placed at its very core. when understanding is truly cherished. Yet, it also contains a stern warning about the steep price exacted when personal ambition, entrenched prejudices, and zealous extremism are allowed to overpower reason and distort truth. History does not always repeat itself in precisely the same form or context. It may change names, settings, tools, or instruments, yet the inherent flaws of human nature often remain stubbornly consistent, destined to recur. And if we fail to heed the lessons of Alexandria, we might well continue to construct dazzling cities and magnificent civilizations, only to witness their eventual collapse in ways that the very people within them could never have anticipated, just as ancient Alexandria did. It is perhaps this profound resonance that explains why the story of an ancient city, separated from us by over 2 millennia, can still compel listeners to such deep contemplation. For at its very heart, this is not merely Alexandria's singular tale. It is an enduring epic, common to every civilization that has ever nurtured the illusion of its own immortality. More intimately still, it mirrors the ongoing struggle faced by each individual in the present day when confronted with pivotal choices between the illuminating path of understanding and the blind alleys of prejudice, between the expansive embrace of open listening and the constricted view of hasty judgment, between the patient act of creation and the impulsive urge to destroy. Though Alexandria has vanished from its once dominant position on the world stage, its lesson remains undiminished in its value, piercingly sharp, and will likely endure as long as humanity continues to grapple with its own intricate, often contradictory nature. When we reflect, perhaps we will recognize that Alexandria is memorable not solely for the magnificent glory it once possessed, but even more so for the profound responsibilities it entrusts to us. These include the sacred duty to safeguard truth from distortion, the urgent imperative to respect and advance knowledge, and the ethical responsibility to protect the right to difference and the individuality of all people. And perhaps most crucially, it is the responsibility to ensure that the most precious fruits of human endeavor are never consumed by the fleeting fires of anger, the outbursts of wrath, and the misguided passions of any given age. If this narrative has indeed stirred within you a profound sense of contemplation, then I extend an invitation for you to delve deeper into similar chapters of history. For history is not merely a straightforward chronicle of past events. It is a sagacious teacher, guiding us not only to understand what transpired, but, more significantly, to recognize precisely what must never be allowed to recur. I encourage you to share this piece with anyone who shares a love for history, cherishes knowledge, and believes in the enduring power of lessons from the past to illuminate the present, helping us to live more mindfully and consciously. And if there is one paramount insight to carry forward from this journey, it is perhaps this: a civilization truly exists and genuinely flourishes only when its people steadfastly commit to safeguarding the precious light of enlightenment and progress, a light that they themselves had to labor tirelessly, dedicating immense time and effort to ignite in the first place.